It is 7:11 in the morning. As we get started, it is the Shopo Hour. In studio, Brother Steve Keogh. Brother Steve, good morning to you.
Rick, good morning, brother. Thanks for having us again. Always happy and grateful to be here with you and your listeners.
It is such a pleasure. And Brother Nick, good morning to you.
Morning, sir. Thanks for having us.
Good to see you as well. I want to say a very good morning to Roberto Carvalho. We miss you and hope you're doing well as always. Brother Mark Criccio is Vegas side family event, celebratory, but will resume with us, I think, next week. Pretty close, yeah? How long does it take to be released when bail is posted?
It depends on how much paperwork there is, yeah. But I did bring the money this time just in case.
There we go. There we go. How was your week? Start with you, Steve. Good week? Bad week?
No, good. Rick, good weeks. On the union side, we went over to Maui to have a labor management meeting with Chief John Pelletier and his team.
Okay.
Come together, talk about changes and moving things forward. Good time, always a good time when we got to go over there. We did that, I think it was last Tuesday. So just doing union stuff, grinding it out with work. But overall, a good work week for me and a good union week.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. Brother Nick, how about you?
Same thing. I was able to attend that meeting. I appreciate the opportunity to sit down with Chief in Maui. I thought it was a productive time. Definitely some good ideas coming from his side of the table and open to a lot of discussion as well. So I appreciate the opportunity. And same thing for myself, just doing the routine work at night, doing HPD, union stuff during the daytime. That's about it.
I'll tell you what, there's, as an entree, months ago we talked about morale and just kind of giving a bit of a diagnosis, if you will. How would you term the word morale throughout our departments statewide through the eyes of Shopo?
It's a good question, Rick. And I think I would have to break it down into a couple of things. And I want to preface this by saying we never got into this job for the money. This goes back to feeling appreciated for work that's been performed. So I would say that morale right now amongst cops in the counties is good. It's not an issue. I will say, though, depending on what county you're in, that does make a difference. I'll be very candid with you, like I always am.
Sure.
We're going to have to go to court and seek arbitration for our members on Kauai to get hazard pay. The mayor on Kauai is not running for re-election. He felt that his county provided a high level of robust protection against COVID, and therefore our members working on Kauai do not deserve hazard pay. So we were, obviously the members there are not happy about that, right? In Honolulu, the membership we're looking forward to coming to some type of an agreement with Mayor Rick. Maui members already got paid. In Big Island, we're moving forward. We have contract talks coming up. So I would say, Rick, the membership comes to work every day with the right attitude. But how's this? They're looking forward to things to come, right? They're looking forward to things on the horizon that might be coming up.
Right. Nick, maybe you can help as well, Brother Steve. To the folks who are dialed in now, what are the compelling, justifiable, even legal conditions surrounding hazard pay when the request is made, or when perhaps even legal filings will be in the future? How do you explain to the public this hazard pay is due to our members because?
This hazard pay is due to our members because of an extremely exceptional circumstance that when our contract was originally written and then renegotiated year after year after year, no one ever anticipated. And we can all agree that during lockdown periods, proclamations, all of these mandate orders, the general public was allowed to either work from home or receive some type of subsidy from the government to help them out financially. Police officers, first responders, EMS, fire, well, still out there in conditions where not too many of us had the proper equipment to be able to handle the job and prevent ourselves from exposure. Still had to do it. We tried to conform, we tried to modify, but at the same time, often police officers don't have the choice as to whether or not they're going to go to a call. They just have to do it, right? The work continued. There were still robberies. There were still homicides. There were still traffic fatalities. There were still assistance calls for people who had medical conditions, which were really the scariest type of situations, because when we got those calls, we didn't know if we were dealing with somebody that was having a heart attack or somebody that was dying because of COVID. Our contract has provisions for hazard pay, specific types of situations. For example, if you ride a ATV, you're entitled to hazard pay for a certain amount of time. If you respond to a call performing a certain task, like a clandestine laboratory for drugs that you have to process, you're entitled to hazard pay. There's a caveat in the contract that says that there are exceptional circumstances not covered under that article. And in those types of situations, you can apply to the county to see if you qualify. And we did. The Human Resources Division of the County of Honolulu at that time told us, well, no, we don't think you qualify. And we arbitrated and we won in Honolulu. And it turns out, and I'll just say it, the Human Resources Director didn't look at our application whatsoever. They kicked it down to their safety specialist, who claimed on the stand that they kicked it back up, and it turned out in arbitration that it really wasn't examined correctly, which is one of the reasons why we won. But it's definitely an exceptional circumstance, and I think we can all agree that your first responders in Honolulu and in all 4 counties deserve some type of special compensation for going to work and doing their job regularly.
Has there been hazard pay agreements in other first responders, HFD and more? Are there any other agencies that are satisfied with their status?
First responder agencies in Honolulu are the only ones that I can speak for. It's my understanding that we're all in the same situation. We're waiting for some type of compensation for it.
Okay. Steve, anything to add?
Yeah, Rick, let me just circle back. You know, everybody, all the cops in the 4 different counties that we represent, there's different things that motivate them. Things that motivate them. And when they come to work and put the uniform on, even if they're not happy with something in their home life, or they're not happy with a decision that a police leadership made, they're still going to come in. They're still going to provide service to the community. One thing, though, that does stand out to me about men and women that wear the uniform that have been on the job a long time, they're getting tired. I hear that. We're getting tired. What does that mean? I don't know. We could take that in 6 different directions. But I can tell you this. I've met so many officers that work in the different counties, and maybe they're disgruntled about pay. Maybe they're disgruntled about their leadership. Maybe they're disgruntled about a couple things. But you know what? They still do the job because they're police professionals. That's the takeaway, right? Do they need a living wage? Yes. If you're a cop and you have a wife and 2 kids and you want your wife or partner or whoever to stay at home to raise the kids, you can't do that on a cop's salary here. It's not happening, right? If you have a family of 4, you need 2 people working. So we're simply just trying to get our members the best compensation that is fair, considering the standard of living and the work that we perform. That's it, right?
As the administrative branch of the department, have they received additional compensation, hazard pay, or are they even eligible?
Are they eligible? Yes. Have they applied? It's my understanding that they have in Honolulu. Have they received it? I don't know.
Okay.
You know, people listening might say, well, listen, you're the police. You signed up to do a hazardous job. Got it. But this was a pandemic. This was a little bit more than that. I think we'd all agree that this was a lot extra. It was so extra that people had to take vaccines, in some cases, to keep their job. Had to take vaccines and had to do things medically. It was a pandemic. So I would say to those people that say, well, if you were fire or you're police or you're EMS, you're expected to take some kind of risk. Fair enough. Got it. But I think we could all agree that we were under the impression that this was a life-threatening virus, that we needed to do certain things as a society. Looking back, maybe we were incorrect, but most people were coming from the best place possible with the information that we were given, okay? And cops and fire and paramedics, we didn't get to stay at home. We couldn't work from home. We had to go face-to-face and interact with the community. When everybody else was told to stay inside, we had to go out. So all we're doing, Rick, is we're pointing out to leadership, says, hey, this was a hazardous situation. Our members, per our contract, per the CBA now, HCA, UPW, and Shopo, we have hazard written into our contract. We were simply looking for that to be met. That's it, Rick.
Yeah.
That's it.
I just, final point on this as a layperson is I recall the histrionics, the claims, the day-to-day report of cases, day-to-day report of deaths, hospitalizations, the uncertainty of what the virus was, how to eliminate, protect completely, and in order for there to be a total, absolute lockdown, that indicates we didn't know what the hell was going on. Yet, 911 calls come in, you still have to be dispatched, and the irony is that you were the folks that had to enforce what some believe now to be misguided policy, but when you're in the moment, that's what you deal with. So when you're dispatched to a hotel and somebody doesn't wear their mask, or somebody is out and about when they're not supposed to be, and you encounter these, no one else is going up, not a security guard, hotel manager, or whatever. The responsibility is always put on HPD for the first response. That's the way I view it, because now we look back and go, it's the flu, guys. Well, in the moment, we didn't know. And yet you were face-to-face in all shapes and forms. I understand the definition of hazard, because during that period, with what we knew, it was. We were told not to come in. We had our company buy home broadcasting equipment. So all of our morning shows and select afternoon shows would have the equipment to work from home. We were issued badges that if we were stopped, that we were considered critical staff. I didn't stay home. I came in every day and invited whoever wanted to come in, come on in. Because that's my job. My job's not to sit at home and, have an Oreo cookie shake. Ooh, that sounds really
Sounds
good.
delicious, actually.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Anyhow, I don't want to belabor the point. I think you've expressed it very well. But please, I'm just interested, and I think many people are, to see what the disposition is.
Yeah. And Rick, just to circle back to morale, and again, I didn't know where the show was going to go today.
Sure.
It's never scripted. We just come here and it goes where it goes. The leadership within each police department makes a huge difference in morale, as you can appreciate, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody has a boss, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody has a boss. If things are good with the boss and the leadership, usually the workforce has a pretty good day. Now, police departments are paramilitary organizations, so we have to put up with a little bit more than most. But again, the right leadership, doing the right things, and making the right decisions for their people, and balancing those decisions for the people with the benefit of fiscal responsibility and some other things, it's essential. It goes without saying, well, yeah, the chief of police is an important position. Got it. But when it comes to morale, the chief and their team directly affect morale. How many of you don't like your boss? Well, if you don't like your boss, do you like going to work? Right? Mm-hmm. So it all circles back to police leadership being proactive, sometimes reactive when they need to be, but I can't stress that enough, that the leadership of the police chief, the team that individual picks, and how the team interacts with their people really affects police morale in a big way. Yep.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. We have the luxury on the Honolulu State Board, the Shopo State Board, of being able to see how all 4 counties act and how their chiefs and their executive administrative staff act. And it's pretty obvious to us when you have a chief that's got a team and you've got a chief that just has players. And maybe we can have discussions about specifics behind closed doors because those chiefs aren't here to defend themselves. But we can see it. It's very obvious. When you have a chief that has a team, you can really get things done. You'll still disagree, and you'll disagree often, but you'll also agree often. When you have a chief that only has players, you're never going to get anywhere. That chief is going to be stagnant. It doesn't matter how often that person is out in the media, how often that person goes to lineups, what types of new equipment that person is trying to get, what types of modifications they're trying to get to hire people, retain people. If they don't have a team, they're not going to get any progress done whatsoever.
So in the hierarchy of a department, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you said paramilitary chief, assistants, HPD, I think 2 assistants.
Deputies.
Then assistants, and then goes to major, down to lieutenant? Captain, lieutenant.
Yep.
Okay. So what I'm trying to figure out is that in that whole strata of leadership, I'm having a difficult time of how the words and actions of a lieutenant may supersede that of an assistant or the chief himself. In other words, how is it digested in the field of team? Is there a perception maybe the team is fractured? Maybe there really isn't a team. It's just people in positions. Or there's a real palpable sense of they're singing out of the same hymn book, may not like a decision or 2 or 3, but at least I know there's good, solid direction, a vision, and we know where we're going. Is that too much of a... Yeah.
So is your question kind of how is a vision created and how is it implemented and who has the authority to do it? Is that kind of...
No, I think that was a long question. I'm going to boil it down to...
Sure.
How's the perception if it is a team or not a team?
I think the average beat cop is going to have the greatest amount of interaction with their lieutenant and their sergeants or their specific sector sergeant. Not too much interaction with their captain. Not a whole lot of interaction with their major.
Okay.
Majors are going to get their instructions from in the Honolulu Police Department from their bureau chiefs who are assistant chiefs. Who are responsible then to one of the 2 deputy chiefs who is responsible to the chief of police.
Gotcha.
So it really trickles from the top down. I think the core element in Honolulu, from what I've seen, of that team that I'm referring to is the chief of police down to the assistant chiefs. So you're talking about roughly 10 to 12 people who are really, really responsible for making sure that the machine operates correctly. That is the core. From my point of view, as a union official, and I'll disclaim myself, as a union official, that is my opinion. That is the core to the team.
Okay. Got it.
Couple things just for the listeners. Not every county police department is structured exactly the way we said it. Maui does not have the rank of major. Kauai does not have the rank of major. And I don't believe Big Island does either. It goes lieutenant, captain, then assistant chief.
Okay.
In general, we'll speak about Honolulu. When a new chief comes in, when Chief Joe came in, he gets to pick his deputies. We call them 2 and 3. Okay. But there's already assistant chiefs that are in place that Chief Joe has to work with.
So, okay, I gotcha.
He doesn't
They're
get to
grandfathered in. And
they're already there.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, I would say, very candidly, if I was the number 1 guy coming into that spot, I wouldn't just want to pick my 2 and 3. I'll be honest with you. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, if I had my way, I'd like to pick them too. And I think most chiefs would probably like to pick their inner circle team. But there are players that are already there from previous administrations to kind of just
Gotcha.
break that down. So the chief comes in, appointed by the police commission. Okay, he gets to pick a deputy, 2 of them.
Yep.
But the assistant chiefs, the majors, the captains, depending on the department, and the lieutenants are already there. Within the state of Hawaii, lieutenants and below are a part of Shopo. Once you go past the rank of lieutenant, you now become part of executive management. You are selected by the leader of the agency to either fill a captain role in our other 3 counties, a captain or major role in Honolulu County. In order to and there's a process. As a lieutenant, I cannot just suddenly go from lieutenant to major. I would need to make the decision to apply to be captain, if that makes sense. Same thing with, I can't suddenly be an assistant chief. Now, could I be a deputy chief? Could a chief come in and say, hey, Nick
You're
and
my
Steve,
choice.
you're my guys?
Yeah.
That's possible.
Yeah.
Highly unlikely, but possible.
I'd pick you.
Thank you, Rick. I appreciate that. So that's kind of how it breaks down. And again, let's give this disclaimer. Being the chief of police has got to be a overwhelming, ginormous responsibility. And think about it. You come in, you get to pick your 1 and 2, but you don't get to pick anybody else. That can't be easy. I'm telling you, right? It can't be.
No.
It can't be the easiest thing.
Speculatively, I would imagine that there are those in the higher ranks of the executive part of the department. They may have aspirations themselves to become promoted and perhaps even become chief. When that happens, it's not an indictment on anybody. But we all know there are some that would hold sway over doing whatever it would take. Morally, ethically, legally, I get it, correct. But there's that element of, gee, I kind of want to get to that level. And there could be that type of either overt or subtle frictions, all of that.
I think your observations are fair and definitely plausible. Again, it's difficult to put your team together when you're inheriting people who have been picked by other people for other reasons, and you have a different direction that you're going to. So basically, you have to rely on their willingness to, I don't want to say conform, but be a part of your idea and your management style, your direction. And humans are humans. That's just the way it goes. So I'm sure at times it's difficult for them to want to play along with the team. Well, I think we've seen that before. I mean, like Steve said, it's a very difficult job. I couldn't do it. I'm not qualified to be the chief of police. I don't think I'd be a very good one. I wouldn't take the job if I was offered it. But at the same time, I do recognize that you can't do that job if you don't have a team. If you only have players, you're not going to get anywhere.
Gotcha. Final thought?
So how's this? I would think whether you're in the private sector or the public sector, if you are a leader and a good leader and an effective leader, you want to develop your people. You want them, if they want to have the tools to move up. So I would say, to your point, if there are guys on the team or girls on the team that want to move up, great. Work with them, train them, get them ready to, let's say, be your replacement. But to your point, in due time, not to sabotage, not to try to roadblock. Everybody's got to, you want to develop your people, but not at the expense of cutting yourself out or not having your vision implemented, right? And you just hope that everybody is coming from a good place, because ultimately, to be successful in business, whether it's public or private, you need to create a team, you need to train a team, you need to teach them, you need to motivate them, and ultimately you need to challenge them. And if that means to get to a higher level, then that's excellent, because ultimately we're all going to need to be replaced.
That includes me at this point in time, which is 7:36. As it happens with this program, time is flying by, and we'd love to have you. Give us a call at 521-8383 if you would like to ask, comment, observations, whatever's on your mind with the brothers in studio. I'm going to turn to the news for just a moment. There's a story on Maui where a father is lamenting that his criminally active son was granted too low of a bail on his latest offense. And this speaks to what we talked about in the past few weeks about decisions made throughout the course of jurisprudence. Your thoughts about this story? It's a bit unusual that you would have a family member say, wait a minute, you need to make that more expensive for my son to get out. Nick, what do you think of this story?
I'm familiar with it. I saw the story. It is extremely strange to have family members say if the bail were higher, he would have been behind bars and this never would have happened. I don't want to call it an excuse, but it is a weird thing to hear a parent to say. I disagree with some of the commentary that was made on that article regarding the police failing to get a high bail. I think we've been through this already.
Yeah.
It's common knowledge that when you're charging a felony suspect, you have an idea of what your bail is going to be. You ask for that bail from a judge, and a judge either grants it or tells you, no, this is what the amount is going to be. Now,
either higher or lower?
Higher or lower,
okay.
Right. So you may, on occasion, have a judge that says, no, you know what, I think this should be higher. It's rare, but it does happen. And then you may have a judge that says, no, you know what, you're asking for too much money. I'll only give you this much. But again, and I just want to stress this, just because a detective who's going for immediate charging says this is the bail that I feel is appropriate doesn't necessarily mean that that's the bail that's going to get affixed to it. That detective does not have the say as to what that amount is going to be. It's a recommendation that the detective makes when they do a bail conferral with a judge.
So in this case, it was $55,000. But the individual has pretty profound criminal history. The charge previous to the ones levied now, carjacking and more, dealt with kidnapping and other offenses, and that's where the $55,000 bail was applied. And you're right, I did notice that in the article that it was the police department responsible, but the clarification, that recommendation, the decision is from the judge. Binding decision.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. But the premise about a parent having to go to that length, I know I mentioned it early in the morning. I don't want to try and put myself in the shoes of any other parent. I can only say what's mine. But I can say this. My boy ain't going down like that. If there's a history, if there's indications, then there are drugs, drug use, and all this. I am deep in the woods, brother. I am wearing the same skin as my son, and I'm going to do every single thing humanly possible to prevent escalation to where it is in this point. Now, that's just my personal take. Thoughts?
I have actually a few.
Please.
That article pissed me off. Let me tell you why. First of all, my heart goes out to the father. Mm-hmm. He's obviously heartbroken at how his son's life has turned out. So let me give that as the disclaimer. I was happy to see that he did not hesitate to criticize the life choices of his son, and his son's choices negatively impacted the community that he lives in. But where I got frustrated is that poor man is misinformed. Maui PD is not the reason why your son was on the streets making bad decisions negatively affecting the community. Your son was on the streets because of the decision of judges. It's not Maui PD's issue. Additionally, The undertone of that piece by the media was to disparage the Maui Police Department and the work the officers do. Again, the narrative of the media loves to highlight as best they can cops not doing their job. That piece was not highlighting the judges not doing their job, if we want to word it like that. It was Maui PD didn't do this. If it was for Maui PD, I felt empathetic to that father, but I was frustrated that nobody educated him after his moment of grief that this is not a Maui Police Department failure. If we want to look at a failure or call it a failure, it's the people that wear the robes, the black robes that make the decision. It's not the police officers. And it would have been nice if when they did that piece, they highlighted that. But no, it was all about what Maui PD didn't do. And this goes back to the narrative that if there's anything that the media can do to disparage the police departments, they're going to do it.
Nick, final thought on this before we take our final break.
Again, I share Steve's point of view about being empathetic to the parent, and I do appreciate the fact that the parent made that final comment about how they still cared for their son. I think that's a very good thing. But at the same time, I don't agree with the theme of the piece. And it's a shame that it took the direction that it did, because I think we've spent a lot of time in the last few weeks trying to educate people on this show about how it actually works.
Yeah. It is 7:50 in the morning. News Radio 830 KHVH, referencing past shows. We were celebratory that Sarah's Law had in fact passed through the Big Square building. However, we'll cover the latest after this. Once again, 7:52 in the morning here on the Shopo Hour. Glad you're with us here. 521-8383. Time for one call if you would like to make it, but more compelling stories ahead of us. Sarah's Law. We were exclaiming that positivity, that there is a wrong being righted. And this with the multiple offenses by the individual who struck and hit and killed Sarah and severely injured her friend. Legislature virtually in unanimity passed this law, elevating to a third-class felony, I believe, am I correct there? To a felony, and subsequent consequence therein. It's on the governor's desk, but it's in his veto pile. I'd like to get your thoughts about this, and is there any reason that you can think of that perhaps this bill should be vetoed?
I think that it's interesting to read that State Office of Public Defender was against the bill. I think it's interesting to see that even the prosecutors were saying, we're going to have a hard time with this. It seems to me that given the propensity for what we call DWAL violations, driving without a license, whether it's been revoked for DUI, revoked for any other type of civil suspension, or even just you don't have a license, you never got one, or it expired and you never got it renewed. It's kind of a common thing. And I think I have a feeling that these entities looked at it and said, well, this is a lot of work. Like, this is going to be an overwhelming amount of work for us to handle. And there may not have been a whole lot of coordination between the legislators and these other agencies when the bill was drafted. I believe we can all agree that the spirit of this law is correct, that its intent is good, and that it's something that I think we can all agree needs to happen. But at the same time, it confuses me that there wasn't a lot of coordination before it actually got into before it was actually ratified.
Yeah, so it doesn't sound, if I hear it correctly, not a lot of consultation, even a conversation with HPD, other law enforcement agencies, with prosecutors' offices. It is a state law. And so is that the norm, that the legislature doesn't promote outreach when crafting and or deciding the status of a bill? Or is it the other side? We're not being, by we, meaning the public agencies, aren't aggressive enough or pointed enough to make sure they're informed as much as possible.
From my observations, I think there is often a lack of communication between the person crafting the bill and then the people that actually have to apply it.
Okay.
And this goes, prosecution, incarceration, and also enforcement.
Yeah.
We have on a few occasions in Shopo had to actually take our own time to contact legislators and say, you know what, we have issues with this bill and this is why. We don't often get approached on the union side from people who are drafting these bills and saying, what is the actual practicality of this? Like, we have this conception, we have this idea. Is it actually going to work? Could you help us hone it in a way so that it would be workable for your people? Or could you help us get into the mindset of the police department when we're drafting this thing so we understand how it's enforceable? We don't really get any outreach like that at all. And I'd like to say one other thing. There was a comment made that maybe this person who committed this crime would have been out of play at the date in question if there was more enforcement. I'd like to point out that a week prior, the person was in court for a DWAL. So obviously, with the amount of DWAL citations and arrests this person had, enforcement was not an issue.
Mm-hmm. That's it. Consequence was. We have just a couple of minutes, Steve.
I hope that this gets revisited. If it's not going to be supported by the prosecutor's office, and it's important. What we're doing now is not working. I can tell you from experience on the street, if someone gets a criminal summons to appear for driving without a license and they miss that court date, I can tell you the judges assign a warrant of between $100 and $500. Mm-hmm. This is important. Let's revisit it, and let's not just put it to the wayside. And to your point, key players need to communicate to make it effective so it can actually have some teeth.
Yeah.
On the veto desk, because I do not believe for one moment that Josh finds fault with the intent. I find it interesting that this bill had gone through House, Senate, crossover, conference, and still passed with multitude of what apparently either are flaws or difficult scenarios for agencies to enforce and prosecute. So we have just about a minute remaining. What is the meaning of life? We have 1 minute. No, I'm just kidding. He's ready to answer. Meaning of life in 12 seconds.
To have good and bad experiences, and then as a spiritual being, grow from it. So when we leave these physical bodies, we're higher consciousness.
I was going to say ribeye and Cabernet.
Ooh, well, that's...
So
wow.
We were in the same neighborhood. Then again, maybe not. I'm not sure. Great hour, guys. Thank you so very much as always. Much appreciation. Brother Nick, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Brother Steve, mahalo plenty, bro.
Rick, always enjoy the time with you and the listeners. Thanks.
And stand by, because the Rick Hamada program continues in just a moment. And wishing you aloha